Well, Chapel family, welcome. This is week 2 of our series, Permission to Speak. And we wanted to give you just a quick little devotion about what we're going to read coming up in this next week as we read through Psalm 22 through Psalm 41 and finish this first book of the 5 book of the Psalms. And as we discussed last week, when it comes to permission to speak, one of the great things about the Psalms is that they are inspired and emotional models of how to speak to God in seasons of blessing, loss, and breakthrough. If you have been reading along, which I pray that you have been, we've seen a lot of psalms of what are called laments or sorrow, or even questioning of God when people are going through these seasons of loss especially, or if people are pursuing them unjustly, and they're pouring their hearts out to God. And what the Psalms do, which is so beautiful, is that these people were writing these poems and these songs, and God saw them, inspired them to be written, and put them in the Bible to be able to tell us that these are examples of how I want you to be able to have the freedom and the permission to speak to me. They're inspired by God, but they are emotional models of people. And so when we find ourselves in seasons of blessing and breakthrough, the theme in the first book of the 5 books in the book of Psalms is a lot of seasons of loss, seasons of unjustly being pursued. And one of them that we're going to read in this next section is Psalm chapter 34. Now, when you read Psalm chapter 34, you're going to see a description at the top. Some of the Psalms, as we get into them, remember there's the title of the Psalm at the top, but many times there's a description not only of who wrote it, but they give you the specific setting. And as we look here at Psalm 34, that we're going to come up to this next week, look what it says there at the top. Psalm 34 is a psalm of David when he changed his behavior before Abimelech. Now, Abimelech was a king of a city in an area that was known as Philistia, where the Philistines lived. David was being pursued unjustly by King Saul at this time. King Saul was filled with a lot of jealousy. People were coming up with songs saying Saul has killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands, and Saul felt threatened by David. And so Saul's solution to it was to unjustly pursue David and kill him. So David and his mighty men are running away from Saul as Saul is pursuing them, and he ends up in Philistia to this king Abimelech. And David wrote this psalm right after that, and he went into Philistia to be able to escape anonymously, to be able to escape from Saul. But this psalm was written after he changed his behavior before Abimelech, so that Abimelech, drove David out, and David went away. Just to be able to explain that real quickly, David saw that as he approached them, this is in 1 Samuel 21, you can read the story there in 1 Samuel 21, what we will see is that David saw that they recognized him, that he wasn't going to be able to find refuge in Philistia because they recognized that he was David. They said, isn't this the guy that they're singing these songs? David has killed his 10,000s that Saul is pursuing. And instead of being able to be there anonymously to get that refuge, they recognize him. So David was seeking the Lord. What do you want me to do? And he changed his behavior to be able to look insane. And Abimelech was like, get this guy out of here. And so David comes down and he begins to worship God and to be able to thank him. And before I get into a few of these verses, let's try to put ourselves in this context. Has there been a moment in our lives where we feel or we know that we have been pursued by others unjustly? When you found yourself in a situation, maybe that you haven't done anything wrong, but maybe people are talking about you in an unjust way. What do we do about that? Well, that's where David found himself as he wrote this song. And let's look at the words that he says that we should do as well if we find ourselves in those circumstances. Verse 4 through 8 is what we're going to talk about here real quick. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all of my fears. Those who look at him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. This poor man called, and David's referring to himself, and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Verse 8 and 9, beautiful verses here. You may recognize this. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. You see, David was trying to take refuge in a foreign land to be able to get away from Saul, this person and these people that were unjustly pursuing him, to be able to bring him down. But David's response to all of that is, as I was trying to seek refuge in different places, what I realized is that I need to seek God, that I need to find refuge in him, because blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. Fear the Lord, you, his holy people, for those who fear him lack nothing. And so as we go into this next section of reading, Psalm 34 teaches us this, is that God, in these verses, we find out he saves and he satisfies. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Those who seek him when they are unjustly pursued. I don't know what that looks like for you if you're in that season right now. I want to encourage you that our response in many times is to be able to seek refuge and safety in other people, in being able just to escape in different ways from the challenges that are right in front of us. But David in Psalm 34 reminds us that when we find ourselves in circumstances like that God saves and satisfies those who seek the Lord when they are unjustly pursued. So we continue our reading this week in this series called Permission to Speak. And if you find yourself in a circumstance like David does here, seek God this week. As we go through these readings of Psalm 22 through 41 and finish out book 1 of the book of Psalms, seek him daily. Continue to read. Continue to pray through the Psalms. Often what I do is I'll read a psalm that we go through and then change the pronouns to be able to turn it into a prayer of I am speaking these words to God. Seek God this week so that you know what you have permission to speak to God. Pour out your heart to him. Be honest this week and continue to seek him. God bless. Keep it up.